Hello, I'm HoJo.
And I'm Hunnsy.
And welcome to this, the 38th episode of HoJo and Hunnsy's Hard Rock House, the safe space for old rock Gumbys just like us, where we've been looking under the sofa for our sanity after the madness of last week, haven't we, Hunnsy? Don't you remember that we went a bit balmy because we were talking about all things that had nothing to do with old rock? We were talking about new rock.
Sleep Token, yes.
Sleep Token, and you talked about Checkered Past when there was a slight doubt as to how rock they were.
Yeah, we kind of went a little bit off brief.
So we're going to get back on message today.
I hope so. We'll see, won't we?
Let's dive in, should we? You can tell me exactly what it is you've been listening to, and we'll let the single-digit listener decide whether we're back, or we need to be hauled out and shot behind the bike sheds.
You never know what I've been listening to, but your back is on point from what I've been listening to.
Okay, Sebastian Bach? Back in Black?
No, I did see Sebastian Bach on the YouTube this week singing Don't Stop Believing on the Rock Monster Cruise.
And how did that go?
I'm going to put it down to the quality of the camera and the phone that was being used to recording it.
Right, okay, so we know what that means.
I'm going to give him credit because we've talked about Sebastian Bach before on this podcast when he was dressed as a walnut or something or whatever it was in...
Yeah, on The Voice.
No, not The Voice, the Masked Singer thing.
Sorry, The Masked Singer. I don't watch this shit, but yes, The Masked Singer.
It's not as bad as that. I think he does all right, actually. Both of us as singers in bands, I think we'd both struggle to do Don't Stop Believing.
It's a brave choice, though, isn't it? It's, well, brave or stupid.
Yeah.
I've got a story about somebody doing Don't Stop Believing in karaoke, because it's quite a karaoke favourite, isn't it?
It is. That and Living on a Prayer are the two songs that you should never attempt on karaoke.
Yeah, my nephew did it once. My brother, when he got married again, his son, the night before the wedding, we went to do karaoke. It was in Cyprus, and there were a load of fucking horrible Russians in the same bar doing terrible karaoke. But that's another story. And he did Don't Stop Believing, but he made the cardinal error of starting too high.
Yeah.
Just a small town.
Yeah.
And then where do you go from there?
You walk off, don't you, really?
No, you do the Alan Partridge style, dropping down 3 octaves, which is exactly what he did, and it was very funny.
Yeah. To be fair to Sebastian, he did all right. 6 out of 10. I've watched quite a bit of footage from the current Monsters of Rock cruise that is currently, it might not be currently, it might have docked now, but it might have dockened.
Doc McGeed.
Or Doc McGeed. There's been footage available on YouTube. I'll tell you what I did watch, actually. Aldo Nova doing Fantasy. Now, that was fucking
This
brilliant.
is recent, is it?
Yeah. LA Guns are on there. I saw some footage of them. That was really good.
Imagine if that ship went down.
Yeah.
That'd be the end of rock as we know it, wouldn't it?
Well, it would be.
There'd be nobody left. Might be a gap in the market for your band Goats in Trees, though. Would you like to go on that cruise?
Yes and no. The chance to see some of these bands loved back in the day would be brilliant, but I just don't know whether I'd want to be on a boat.
Because you couldn't get away from it.
I don't like the water. I'm not a fan.
I don't like the water.
We don't know enough about it.
There's strange things in it.
Yeah. I did some work with a marine conservation brand years ago.
Did you start off by saying, I don't really like the water?
And this is another episode where anybody tuning in now is thinking, what are these two books talking about? Yeah, marine conservation, right? I did some work with a marine conservation brand. When you're rebranding any company, right, you do your diligence and you look into their business and the brand and you find out everything about them. They gave me this stat which made me think, fucking hell, that's amazing. Do you know, like, of the Earth's entire water, oceans, seas,
rivers, streams.
I think they were talking generally about oceans, not streams. Only 14% of it is mapped.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, that is a statistic. I'd gone off on a tangent there because when you're talking about streams, I was thinking, how many streams have we got? Right, let's get back to the long-standing back thing. Why did me saying back have something to do with what you've been listening to?
Remember when I said on the last pod I watched that Nothing But a Good Time on Paramount Plus?
Yes.
Within that series of episodes, they did talk about this band as one of the main influences on that whole scene. I was a huge fan back in the day. I used to follow them all over the country watching them. So I've been listening to the 4th album by Finnish rockers, Hanoi Rocks.
Hanoi Rocks. We've talked about Hanoi Rocks before, haven't we? I think I said at one time that I'd been listening to Two Steps from the Move. Is that what you're going to go and say you've been listening to?
4th album, 1983.
First one that really anybody in England knew about, though, wasn't it?
Not me.
Oh, really? Were you already a fan?
I'd adopted them on the previous album, Oriental Beat, and the one before that as well, Bangkok Shocks and Saigon Shakes. I was already aware of them. And
I'm impressed because I thought the only album that people really started to get interested in was Back to Mystery City.
I had those two on import. And Self-Destruction Blues. It was the one that took them up the next step, particularly Malibu Beach Nightmare. That was the one that rock clubs started playing.
It was the first Hanoi Rocks album that I heard, and then I went, to be fair, not musically, but sonically was very disappointing. Back to Mystery City was really the first one that sounded like a proper band. It was all a bit scratchy beforehand. Songs were good.
On the 3 albums before this, the songs were really good. And I agree with you, the production was a bit sketchy. And
also their playing was a bit sketchy as well.
Yeah, well, their playing was always a bit sketchy live.
It was, but they had made some progress by Back to Mystery City. Anyway, tell me what it is that drew you back to it.
It was the one that made me go, yeah, there's something special happening here.
This is the shit.
I always loved the sleeve to Oriental Beat, pressing through that cling film and they're all covered in paint. That was quite interesting. This one, in terms of styling and the way they just looked so fucking cool, didn't they?
On the cover?
There's just Mike and Andy on the cover, but there's that shot on the back of them all stood there in this almost reminiscent of the Cinderella Night Songs album cover.
Not as good as that, sure.
Not as good as that at all.
No, and more legs.
More legs, yes, obviously. Yeah. But they just looked the nuts. Because it was 1983. This was before the strip had really took off. There was only crew were kind of around.
Yeah, and that was a whole different thing. That was like bondagey, sex dungeon stuff, wasn't it? That's what I was doing in 82 anyway.
Bondagey sex dungeon stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was knocking about in those kind of places.
If you look at photographs of Nasty Suicide and then fast forward 3-4 years to Guns N' Roses and look at Izzy Stradlin. Izzy Stradlin just looked at photographs of Nasty Suicide and went, I'm going to copy exactly what he's wearing.
That's true.
Their influence for me went above and beyond just the music.
Mike Monroe had a silky black suit on, didn't he, on that cover?
Yeah, and Andy McCoy's wearing a white tuxedo.
Yes, that's what it looked like. Yeah. And they both did look brilliant. Although I did think even at the time that Mike Monroe needed to put some jam on his shoes and invite his trousers down for tea, didn't he? Remember how short his trousers were?
Yeah, he's a tall lad though, isn't he? But the music stands up, doesn't it?
Yeah, before we move on to the music, there's only one thing about that cover that always irked me.
Was it the pink scarf coming out of Mike Monroe's pocket?
No.
Was it Andy McCoy's arm round his waist?
Not at all. No, that's quite all right by me.
Okay, what irked you about this cover?
Do you not remember what the prop was?
On the front?
I can't remember if it was the front or the back.
The prop, no. But,
yeah, there was a prop.
No, remind me.
Do you know, it was a leopard.
Oh, yes, that's on the...
And do you remember how shit it was?
Yeah.
It was supposed to look like a real-life leopard, but they'd obviously got some kind of stuffed animal. Do you remember there used to be a stuffed animal museum at Tring, near Milton Keynes? Yeah. Have you ever been? It's brilliant, actually.
No, I haven't.
The stuffed animal museum, I don't know if it's still there. I don't know if it's quite PC enough these days, but I used to go there. It was kind of thing that you go... If you'd smoked a lot of dope and you wanted to really do something wild, you go to the Stuffed Animal Museum in Tring.
We are painting a wonderful picture of 1980s England, aren't we?
I think it was exciting. I used to love going there. They had millions and millions of these stuffed animals that somebody in the early 20th century had bagged and killed.
When you get stoned in 1980, whatever it is in England, and you're into heavy metal, you get stoned and you go to a stuffed animal museum.
The Stuffed Animal Museum in Tring, absolutely, yeah. They must have got this leopard on day release from the Stuffed Animal Museum in Tring. If they were trying to convince anyone that it was a real-life leopard, it failed miserably. It's terrible, isn't it? I'm glad they did it, because now we've got to talk about the Stuffed Animal Museum, so that's good.
It's really good, and I'd completely forgotten about that, to be honest.
There you go.
And it'll make everybody hurry back to their covers of this album and go, yes.
Get into their vinyl collection and go, he was right, there's a stuffed leopard on the back of it. Tring was where I once fell asleep drunk on a train and missed my stop, which was Bushy.
Yeah.
Ended up in Tring, which is quite a long way away, and then stumbled out. And there was a queue of 3 people waiting for taxis, even though it was quite late. And I think I was slightly the worse for wear. And then this taxi turned up, or what I thought was a taxi. And I thought, I'm next in the queue. And I opened the door and I got in the front seat. And then this voice behind me in the queue went, "Oi, that's my mum."
What, you just got in someone's car?
His mum had come to pick him up. And I thought because I was ahead of him in the queue, it was just the next taxi on the rank. And I got in the car. Brilliant.
Did you get a lift up?
No, I had to say, I'm terribly sorry and get out.
Right.
Tail between stuffed animal tail between legs.
Can't believe we're putting Tring on the map.
So talking about the music, we've talked a lot about the cover. Talk to me about the music.
There's probably a couple of tracks on the album that are still decent, but nah. I think Sailing Down the Tears and Licks.
See, I love Sailing Down the Tears.
My favourite song on the album is Ice Cream Summer. I love that. But there's all sorts of stuff. They'd been listening to New York Dolls, obviously.
Didn't really know about it. I was not really a New York Dolls fan, so I didn't really know their oeuvre very well, so I wouldn't have been able to make that comparison.
You know that New York Dolls song, Stranded in the Jungle? If you listen to that and then go and listen to Mental Beat, it's got that vibe.
Oh, that jungle nonsense.
It's got loads of songs that sound like early Alice Cooper. You know, the ballady one, Until I Get You. That definitely sounds like an Alice Cooper song.
What I remember about Back to Mystery City was it felt like side one from the good old days of vinyl.
Yeah.
It sounded rock, and then side two was very surprising because it was very, very poppy. It wasn't very rock at all, but it was great. It was really, really good.
Aside from the title track, which is the last song, Back to Mystery City,
right,
which kind of goes back to the rock.
Yeah.
But that whole Sailing Down the Tears, Lick Summer Love, Beating Gets Faster, Ice Cream Summer, I think there's influences for the Cars in there, American pop sort of stuff.
I remember listening to it at the time and thinking it feels like a deliberate idea to make one side quite heavy. Not heavy, but more rock music.
Yeah.
And the other side more pop music. I thought they were really good at both. Was Tooting Beck Rec on it?
Yeah, Tooting Beck Rec's on it.
Which is brilliant lyrically, isn't it?
Yeah, I think they lived in Tooting Beck when they first moved to London, which I'm sure is very gentrified now and is probably one of the nicest places to live in London. It's
probably costs about £2 million to have an apartment there.
But I reckon in around about 1982, when maybe they were living there, shithole.
Well, also, you could get in a squat, couldn't you, back then in London? Squats existed. There were all these houses that would fall into rack and ruin in the suburbs of London. And it was one of the ways that bands could actually survive and develop, wasn't it? Because they'd break into these houses that were boarded up and start living there. And that's completely finished now because everything's been gentrified and done up and sold for millions of pounds.
Yeah, they have to go and live in Tring now, don't they, bands?
I don't think they get anything in Tring.
But Tooting Beck Rec, I'm just reading about it, was inspired by an apartment full of rats in Tooting Beck when they were living there. So there you go.
It was a great record. I'm absolutely on board with this. Fantastic record. Really uplifting as well, I find. I find it's quite joyous. I don't know about you.
Yeah, going back to that Nothing But a Good Time thing as well, Corey Taylor's on it, and he talks about when grunge came along and killed that whole scene. People were sick and tired of songs about having fun and getting pissed in girls and all that sort of stuff.
Frivolous music.
The reason why they were drawn to grunge was because they were talking about serious issues.
And probably people who were living in Seattle in the rain were going, yeah, that's more my life.
Yeah.
What's going on in Hollywood, nothing to do with my life.
Yeah, but then he talks about the revival of that scene. A lot of these bands, there's a second wave, I guess. It's very much back. People who were there at the time who are now in their 50s and 60s are taking their kids and their kids are all into it, blah, blah, blah. But he was asked, why do you think that is? And he just went, look, it's come back because the world's shit. People just want to have a good time. It's good time music. It's fun. It's happy. This album is a joyous album, isn't it? It's a Malibu Beach, Mental Beat, Tooting Beck Rec, all get you going, a bit pissed and you have a bit of a dance around and stuff like that.
But having said that, I think that album's better than a lot of that Sunset Strip thing, because what happens with Sunset Strip is it then becomes lowest common denominator, doesn't it? Nobody's writing a song about what a terrible life it is living in a rat-infested apartment with a bit of humour about it, like Tooting Beck Rec was. It often happens, you just end up getting the top line of what a movement was about, and then all the subtlety just gets weeded out, and all you end up with then is Motley Crue talking about fucking women in strip clubs, and all the charm of it has gone, in my opinion.
I agree.
By the time you get to Girls, Girls, Girls with Motley Crue, is there any charm in that record? I think there's none.
No. Ice Cream Summer is a song about a summer romance, isn't it?
Yes, but a line like the ice cream's melting down my pants is
yes,
so much more endearing than, oh yes, I've got a rocket in my pocket, or whatever nonsense people started writing.
But like Mental Beat, Mike Monroe wrote it about his behaviour as a child. Isn't it? It's just interesting rather than
I think so. I think it's a much more subtle take. Like I say, things get lowest common denominated and then they lose all their charm. Yeah. That album's got loads of charm.
It's got loads of charm, a brilliant band, but that was it for me. I checked out after this record.
Really? You didn't like Two Steps from the Move?
Didn't like it. There's a couple of songs that were all right, but I didn't like the fact Bob Ezrin got his hands on them and just didn't work for me.
I really liked Two Steps from the Move.
And then Razzle, sadly.
Of course, as soon as he
That was it. It was done.
It was
done,
all over, wasn't it?
Which was such a shame because they were often touted. If that hadn't happened, they would have been huge.
Yes, because everybody on the Sunset Strip was absolutely obsessed with Hanoi, weren't they?
Yeah. I don't think they would have gone huge because I don't think they were heavy enough to go huge.
It was more about the fact that they weren't going to be a click-track American radio. They just weren't slick enough, I didn't think. For all Guns N' Roses' wasted lifestyle choices, like a lot of those American bands, they were all very well drilled, much better players. It was much more disciplined in terms of the recordings.
Yeah.
Hanoi Rocks was sloppy, and American radio didn't really like sloppy, did it?
No, they were a brilliant live band.
And I used to go and see them all the time.
So
I absolutely loved them. And the sweatiest and jumpy up and downiest gigs I've ever been to, weren't they?
That live show from the Marquee, when they recorded it on VHS, remember it came out on VHS?
Yeah.
All those wasted years. And they did that double live album. And I followed them all around the country. But when they toured back to Mystery City, I think I went to about 8 or 9 shows on that tour.
Yeah, and they were really exciting. For me, it was more glamorous than all the metal stuff that was out.
Yeah, it was different. Yeah. It just felt different.
You've been through the new wave of British heavy metal. That was all quite serious and
brilliant.
Yeah, well, some of it was.
1983, 84, I'd kind of checked out from Motley Crue as well, really.
I never checked in. At the Motley Crue Hotel. No, thank you.
For me, these were top of the league.
Me too. For 2 or 3 years there, they were my number one band.
They were brilliant. Anyway, Mike Monroe's still doing it, still playing around.
And he's a nice man and all the rest of it. Yeah. I'm not really very interested in what he does.
No, I would still rather listen to any of the first 4 Hanoi Rocks albums than anything that Mike Monroe's doing now.
Yeah, me too.
Hang on a minute. Go on. We've agreed on something.
Yes, that's terrible, isn't it? People will be abandoning us in their droves. So there you go. Hanoi Rocks, back to Mystery City. If you haven't heard it, go and discover it. If you have heard it, go back and rediscover it. And if you're ever in the Tring area, go to the Stuffed Animal Museum.
Well, do you have to get stoned before you go there?
No, I don't think so, but it certainly helps.
Okay. I mean, Tring's not far from me where I live now.
There you go. Well, why don't you try it out and report back?
I can't get stoned. I don't do things like that.
No, well, go. All right, don't do that then. But just go to the Stuffed Animal Museum and tell me if you liked it.
Yeah, okay.
Do you know what we've got to do now, though? We've got to move on quickly because we've done the usual thing of gassing on for hours and hours and hours, and we're going to run out of time. And we've got 2 things that we have to do that are very important today.
Okay, what you've been listening to is the first one, probably.
No, the first one you've forgotten. We've got a guest.
Oh, yes, Nils from Norway.
Nils. Hey, let's just recap. Norway is a buzz with excitement about our podcast, isn't it? We're number 45 in the spoken word podcasts in Norway. But anyway, we decided that we had to find out why they loved us so much. So we've managed to get Nils from Norway. So Nils, right here, right now, we're going to hear from him. Hunnsy, a couple of weeks ago, we found out the exciting news that we were number 45 on the spoken word charts. And we put out the APB to find somebody in Norway who was prepared to come and tell us why we're number 45 on the charts up there and what it's like being a rock Gumby just like us in Norway. And Nils Brekker Svensson answered the call, and here he is. We're delighted. Nils, it's fantastic to have you with us.
It's great to be here.
So tell us first and foremost, how did you get to hear about HoJo and Hunssy's Hard Rock House, and what made you answer the call to be a spokesman on behalf of Norwegian metal?
The spokesman of Norwegian metal, that probably a little strong, but how I learned about it, I've listened to Mick Wall's podcast. I don't remember who told me about it, but it's like, okay, listen to HoJo and Hunnsy because they're in the same vein, only funnier.
Ah, that's good to hear, because I was about to say, I hope that we're funnier than Mick Wall's podcast, but you've just confirmed that. That's marvellous.
Yeah. You're probably the perfect podcast for me, and actually the people who are about the same age as me, who used to read Kerrang in the 80s.
So, Nils, tell us where you are in Norway.
I'm in Ski. It's about 20 kilometers south of Oslo.
Can you describe what it's like, ski? What do you do in Ski? Don't tell me you ski.
It's kind of a suburb to Oslo. And I work at Norway's biggest amusement park that's just 8 kilometers from here.
What do you do there?
I'm a marketing coordinator, so everything with graphic design and stuff like that.
Hunnsy's a graphic designer, but he's no good, so we could get you to do all the graphic work. What's the name of the amusement park?
Tusenfryd is, it sounds lame in English, but it's like daisies or something like that. Like the flower.
So when you were at school in Norway, were you always into hard rock and metal? Was metal big in Norway at the time?
Quite big, actually. I've discovered Kiss in 1978, and I've started listening to AC/DC and Thin Lizzy in 1980, and I was 13, 14 years old. In 82, I also started buying Kerrang, and they didn't sell it at the local news station, so I actually had to bicycle 6 kilometers to buy Kerrang. They sold it at Langhus, the same place where, you know, the band Mayhem.
Yes.
Mayhem were formed at Langhus. That's about 5 kilometers from here. And actually, I was friends with all the guys who formed Mayhem and actually sang at the first rehearsals.
Good man.
This is not the thing for me.
Did you get to see bands? Did they come to Norway?
Some of them did. I didn't get to see Lizzy, but up until the Thunder and Lightning tour, they played all the tours here, except the Thunder and Lightning tour. 83 were the first year I started going to gigs, and then I saw Iron Maiden on the Peace of Mind tour and Black Sabbath on the Born Again tour. You got 4 or 5 bigger concerts each year.
So did all your friends like rock music as well?
Yeah, at that time we probably a gang about 20, I guess.
And how long was your hair?
Around the shoulders.
That's pretty good. When we do the podcast, Nils, one of the things that Hunnsy and I are united in is our love of rock music, but also the fact that we think it can be very, very funny. Is that how you view it as well?
Yeah. I don't like music that tries to be funny.
No.
The only band I actually can listen to that are in one way a little funny is actually The Darkness.
So how are we going to get from 45 up the charts? Nils, we need you.
You're a marketeer, Nils.
How are you going to be our Trojan horse in Norway to spread the metal word about HoJo and Hunnsy's Hard Rock House?
Of course, I'll spread it in the groups where I'm a member. That's no problem.
Well, hopefully, your appearance as an interesting guest on our podcast.
That's going to break the internet, Nils. It's been brilliant to talk to you. Thank you so much for giving us your insight into what it's like up in Norway. And thank you for being a listener. And this time next year, when we're number 1 on the charts in Norway, we'll have you back on and we'll have you to thank for it. And we'll open a bottle of champagne in your honour.
Yeah.
Okay, that will be fun. See you next year when you're number 1 then.
So how about that, Hunnsy? Did you enjoy Nils?
He was everything I expected from someone who loves the pod.
And lives in Norway and is a Gumby.
Yeah, exactly.
It was fantastic to have Nils. So thank you, Nils, for coming and telling us all about your life as a Gumby in Norway. Much appreciated. What we have to do now is move swiftly along and talk about what it is that I've been listening to.
I can't wait. Please don't let it be something that I agree with.
Now we could be in trouble here.
Oh, no. 2 albums on 1 episode.
Yeah, could be in serious trouble. 1982.
Yeah.
Debut solo album from a man who'd had a good career in a rock band, and a rock band that I'm pretty sure you've selected one of their albums on a previous episode. So my choice today is Ignition by John Waite.
Oh, wow. Well, yeah, I did No Breaks, didn't I?
I think you did No Breaks, but I've decided to go for Ignition. Do you
Right.
know the record?
I do know the record.
Like your Hanoi Rocks, this is a go-to record for me. It's a very different album for John Waite. Don't know if you agree with this. It doesn't sound anything like the Babies, and it doesn't sound anything like the solo career he had once No Breaks had been released and Missing You had become such a smash. It's a real oddity. It feels like a very New York album to me. Got a nervous energy. Do you know much about it, or do you only know the songs?
I know quite a bit about it. Didn't Pat Benatar's guitar boyfriend thingy?
Neil Giraldo.
That's it. Neil, he produced it, didn't he?
He produced the record because they were both signed to Chrysalis. Neil was in his partner Pat Benatar's band. They were signed to Chrysalis. John Waite's previous band, the Babies, had been signed to Chrysalis. So that's where the connection is. Waite was living in New York at the time, and there are a lot of people who were pulled in to be part of this album that were much more part of that early New York post-punk scene. So Patti Smith, Iggy Pop, all that kind of stuff, Ramones, CBGBs. And you wouldn't think of John Waite as being part of that, would you?
No, not at all, especially on the back of the stuff he was doing with the Babies.
But that was much more kind of classic rock and influenced by Free and Rod Stewart, Faces type lad rock in some ways.
Yeah.
And Ignition was a very different vibe. He'd gone to New York, because he talked to me about this. I've interviewed John on a number of occasions, and had started hanging out with much more of a new wave crowd. For example, there's a song called Mr. Wonderful on there. Do you remember that song?
Vaguely.
No more nice, Mr. Wonderful.
That's on the first side.
Mr. Clean.
Yeah, it's on
side one.
Side one.
That's written with Ivan Kral. Do you know who Ivan Kral is?
Ivan Kral. Why do I know that name?
Ivan Kral was the guitarist on the first 4 Patti Smith albums.
That's why I know the name.
So he wrote stuff like Dancing Barefoot. He also played with Iggy Pop. A really interesting guy, because he was a refugee in New York.
Czechoslovakian, was he Czechoslovakian?
He was Czechoslovakian. His parents were working at the United Nations, and when the Russians invaded Czechoslovakia in 1968, his dad was at the United Nations and denounced this invasion, and actually had been one who'd predicted it was going to happen, and then couldn't go back, and so applied for asylum. So Kral was a refugee.
Oh.
But he co-wrote Mr. Wonderful. Holly Knight, who went on to have massive hits for Pat Benatar, I think, but certainly Tina Turner.
Right, okay.
One of the go-to 80s radio rock songwriters.
Yeah.
She was in a band called Spider, and they'd done a song called Change a couple of years before Waite covered it. And also, here's an interesting fact for you.
Yeah.
Holly Knight played keyboards on Kiss's Unmasked album.
What, it wasn't Don Airy?
It was the one gig Don didn't get.
Oh, no. She played keyboards on Unmasked.
She played keyboards on Kiss Unmasked.
Wow, never knew that.
Yeah. Doesn't play on Ignition, but she contributed the song Chain. And it's a really great version as well. But the album's really interesting. It's got a lot of new wave energy to it. Lots of different styles on the album. Mr. Wonderful's got a jazz feel to it. Change is kind of power pop. You could imagine the Knack doing Change. There's a song called Going to the Top, which is a really nice, almost ballad, but not quite song. Lots of rises and falls in the way that the song's constructed. There's a song called Wildlife at the end, which is another new wave rock mix. But he never did anything like it before. He never did anything like it since. It was a really great record. It only got to number 68 on the charts in America, so you couldn't call it a tremendous success. But it laid the groundwork, at least, for what came next, which was No Breaks and obviously Missing You, the big, huge hit, #1 and all the rest of it. And it was his last record for Chrysalis as well, because he ended up signing with EMI America for the next record.
Do you think it's a lack of success had anything to do with his decision to pivot and change and go for a more different sound on No Breaks? Or do you think it was just an album that he wanted to make because all the things you mentioned before, he'd got New York and he'd met these new people and blah, 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 blah?
I think he made the record he wanted to make in 1982, and then I suspect when it didn't work out for him and he got dropped by Chrysalis and then he managed to get a new deal with EMI America, I suspect there would have been some internal and external pressure brought to bear to write something that was going to be more of a hit and more commercial. Because No Breaks is a great record, but it's a much more mainstream sounding record, isn't it?
Yeah, you can tell why No Breaks was massive.
Yeah, whereas you can also understand why Ignition perhaps wasn't.
Yeah.
It sounded a little looser. It's a very late night sounding record. When I listened to it, I think, I bet he was recording that at 4 a.m, having been out all night in some dingy club and probably taking some drugs that he shouldn't have done. That's the vibe I have in my head when I listen to Ignition.
I am familiar with it and I have listened to it in the past, but I haven't listened to it for years.
And one of the things that also means that it's a go-to is that no matter what style of music John Waite is playing, his voice is just phenomenal.
He's one of the best British rock singers.
Yeah, he's one of the very, very best rock singers there's ever been.
Yeah, I would not disagree with you.
And part of what's so good about him is he can turn his hand to anything. So this album sounds like a rocker who suddenly discovered a nightlife scene in New York that's very new wave dominated and wants to be part of that. But he can sing whatever style anybody wants him to at the drop of a hat. And then later on in his career, he goes country and he can do pop. And he's just such a brilliant, versatile singer.
Are we not talking about bad English then?
Well, funny enough, I was listening to the first Bad English album the other day, and I surprised myself how much I enjoyed it, considering it was a very manufactured AOR record that was designed to be on the radio, and they all had the buffy hair and all that kind of nonsense. Yeah. But even that, he turns in some great performances.
Yeah, some of the vocals on that.
It's not a record I'll go to. If I want to listen to John Waite, I don't go and listen to Bad English as a matter of course, because it feels corporate. But there are still really good songs on it and really good performances.
Yeah, there are. Ignition, I'm going to have to go back and rediscover it.
Ignition is a really worthwhile record as an artistic statement, if you want to sound like a bit poncy about it.
You do sound poncy.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to hear that. So there you go. John Waite's Ignition. That's my choice. We've kind of agreed, the two of us, that both the records we chose this week are great records, and that's not good. So next week we have to fall out irrevocably.
Yeah, but I do think we're back.
We've got over the aberration of last week.
Yeah.
And we're back in the groove. Right, we're going to wrap up there, my friend, because we've churned on for a long, long time. 38 is in the can. Most important takeaways from this episode are that you don't like water. Hanoi Rocks and John Waite have made great records, and you must visit the Stuffed Animal Museum at Tring.
Yes, or go to Norway.
Absolutely. There you go. Who would have thought you'd get such tremendous advice from a hard rock podcast?
Exactly.
Right, mister, I'm going to wave you goodbye, and I'll see you in 7 days' time.
I'll see you later. Have a good one.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.